Well, joining us now from Atlanta, Georgia, is Dr. John Eaves, former candidate for Congress for Georgia's 7th Congressional District. And also with us, we have from New York, Rabbi Marc Schneier, president of the Foundation for Ethnic Understanding. And John, I will start with you. As I mentioned, tell us about, in Georgia, how the victory of Raphael Warnock, that link with Martin Luther King, and very interesting, I've heard people say the Republicans underestimated the tradition of the black churches and how important that was, both for Dr. King and also for Reverend Warnock in this recent race.
Yes, it was significant, and it does remind us of a bygone era where blacks and Jews here in the South, and specifically in Atlanta, had a strong alliance. Martin Luther King, when he was co-pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, and Jacob Rothschild, who was the senior rabbi of the temple here in Atlanta, they had a very strong relationship. And currently today, those two congregations, the temple and Ebenezer, they both continue a yearly Shabbat service on Martin Luther King's weekend. So the Ossoff-Warnock duo is reminiscent of the relationships that blacks and Jews have had here historically here in Atlanta and in the South.
Rabbi Schneier, let's talk about that. How does that tradition go on? Talk about your own work in that area and how, indeed, maybe this dual victory in Georgia is kind of, like I said before, reviving for some the glory days of that alliance during the civil rights years. I'm sorry, I'm asking. That's for Rabbi Schneier. I'll get back to you, John.
Sorry.
I am the author of the definitive text in Black-Jewish Relations, Shared Dreams, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Jewish Community, with a foreword by his son, Martin Luther King III. And as I examine in my book that there was no segment of American society that provided as much and as consistent support to Dr. King as did the Jewish community. It was this historic alliance of blacks and Jews that brought about many of the greatest social and political changes in the history of our nation. At the same time, Dr. King was a great champion of the causes and civil rights for Jews as well. He was an outspoken advocate for the state of Israel. He had many references to the Holocaust. He had zero tolerance and disdain for anti-Semitism, particularly as that ugly head came to the fore toward the end of his life in the more militant wing of the black community. And here we are, 60 years later, celebrating a revival, a renaissance of the Black-Jewish alliance that's having such an impact, an outsized impact on the United States, and particularly in the Senate. As you mentioned before, a Jewish senator for the first time from Georgia, a black senator for the first time from Georgia. Because of these two senators, we now will see the first Jewish majority leader in the United States Senate in Chuck Schumer, and an African-American woman who's becoming the vice president of the United States, who will have the deciding vote in the U.S. Senate. Look at the outsized role that this Black-Jewish alliance played 60 years ago, and look at the outsized role it's playing today in the United States.
All right, now I do want to go to John now for comment on that. But John, maybe you also address the fact that that relationship has changed. There are also some strains that emerged in that alliance over the years, and that were exposed a bit in, especially Reverend Warnock's Senate run.
Well, I mean, in the election and the process of those two men being elected, there really were some things that came out. I think it was a misrepresentation of the views of Reverend Warnock. He has a strong relationship with the senior rabbi of the temple, Peter Berg. I know both of them those men very well. And as the rabbi indicated about Martin Luther King, Reverend Warnock is also very pro-Israel. He's pro-peace. He also is a strong advocate, or he speaks against anti-Semitism and racism. He's very consistent. I just believe that the Republican Party sort of honed in on some comments that were made and were perhaps taken out of context. And again, I think John Ossoff is going to be a wonderful senator representing the state of Georgia. And those two men will re-solidify the relationship that Blacks and Jews have had here in the South over the past many years. And so I'm very optimistic about the two of them working in the Senate to address many issues here in the United States.
Rabbi Schneier, though, I would like you to ask that same question, but take it from the Jewish perspective, because as you said, we certainly could look back on the partnership of Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel and many, many other examples, and certainly today we have these two men going to the Senate, but there have been these strains, and some in the Jewish community, that take a very different view of the African-American civil rights struggle, at least how it's being waged today.
After the assassination of Dr. King in 1968, the Black-Jewish alliance spiraled downward, and there were many, many bumps around the road, and there was the Black community resenting the state of Israel, supporting South Africa. There was great resentment on the part of the Jewish community in terms of Andrew Young when he was UN ambassador meeting with Yasser Arafat. That was the height of Louis Farrakhan's power, probably the lowest ebb in Black-Jewish relations were the Crown Heights riots in 1991. But since then, there has been a genuine effort to rebuild the alliance. I would define the Black-Jewish alliance today as one of cooperation, not one of conflict. And Dr. King understood that a people who fight for their own rights are only as honorable as when they fight for the rights of all people. And I've had the distinct pleasure of knowing Reverend Warnock in 2009. We were both inducted together in Atlanta in the Morehouse College Martin Luther King Board of Preachers, honoring those of us clergy for our oration and oratory skills. And I've known Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff, needless to say. I think this is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity for Black-Jewish relations, for supporting Israel, and ultimately for reuniting the United States at a very, very critical time and a very critical juncture.
Well, John, let's look forward then, because we've been looking really at the microcosm of Georgia, but this has been a tumultuous period or past year in the for the African-American community, for those concerned about it, for civil rights. How optimistic or concerned are you looking forward, especially in light of what's going to happen on Wednesday, the change in the White House from President Trump to President-elect Biden?
I am optimistic. You know, I think you have to look at the South within the context of where we've come from. This is an area of the United States that was very segregationist, segregated. Blacks certainly were second-class citizens, and Jews had a hard time in the South as well. But the South of 2021, and Atlanta in particular, and the state of Georgia 2021 is a much different place. And I'm very optimistic. There are a lot of things that are happening on the ground here in terms of criminal justice reform, social justice, addressing racial inequities. You're seeing how historical congregations such as the Temple from the Jewish community and Ebenezer Baptist Church from the Christian community, Black church working together in terms of restriction. So there's a lot of reasons for optimism. And you also saw a lot of Jews here in Atlanta and the state of Georgia who were very, very involved in the Black Lives Matter protests that occurred this past summer in the United States. So I'm optimistic. I think what happened with Ossoff and Warnock winning the Senate and the roles that they will play in the Senate will be great for this country, but it also will incentivize, motivate, and inspire many Blacks and Jews to continue to work together here in the American South.
And Rabbi Schneier, of course, there are many in the Jewish community that value President Trump for some of the decisions, policy decisions he made regarding Israel and the Middle East, but look more askance at some of his rhetoric, certainly on civil rights. How do you view the situation from a Jewish perspective in the United States going forward on relations with the African-American community and specifically with the Jewish community?
When you speak of, I quote you now, askance about Donald Trump's rhetoric, One thing we've learned from Donald Trump, that words matter, and particularly the words of a president. Since the November election, Donald Trump has repeatedly repudiated allegations, falsehoods, wild conspiracy theories, how the election was stolen, how he won in a landslide. It was President-elect Joe Biden who articulated that the words of a president matter, no matter how good or how bad that president is, how words can either of a president can bring and inspire people or they can incite people. And so interesting that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he understood the immeasurable power of words, how words can hurt and words can heal, how words can tear people apart and how words can bring people together. And think of his immortal words, I have a dream, the words that uplift, the words that are aspirational and bold, words that resonate with us to this very day. So when it comes to the American Jewish community that supported Biden with an 80% support base and the Black community at 82%, we understand how words matter, rhetoric matters, and I think our two communities once again set an example far beyond our numbers here in the United States in terms of the values that we cherish when it comes to our political leadership here in America.
Doctor, just in 30 seconds, let's not forget Kamala Harris will be the first person of color, woman of color, to serve in the chief executive as vice president. Just a word on that, the meaning of that.
That's huge. It's monumental. I believe that Barack Obama's winning the presidency in 2008 was significant, but I think that this is just on par, especially from a female perspective, Black female specifically, and also someone who was of South Asian descent as well. And so I think it's a great message, a great way for people in this country, young girls, to be inspired that there is no ceiling for their success.
All right, Dr. John Eaves, Rabbi Marc Schneier, thanks to you for joining us on Martin Luther King Day, a man whose spirit is certainly one message that the United States is in bad need to hear and to heed in these days. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.